Welcome to the We Got It podcast,
an MSU sports podcast for everyone.
We're Jonah and Abby,
a husband and wife who's probably a little bit too obsessed with Spartan sports.
And we want to share a little bit of that obsession and joy with you, from casual fans
to die-hard, bleed green fanatics.
And we hope to make following Michigan State athletics more easy, enjoyable, and engaging for everyone.
So go green.
Go white. Go state. Welcome in, everybody, to another Victory Podcast.
Victory Podcast.
We kind of missed having these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
It's good to have one back.
I was thinking about it today at work of how much more excited I am to record when we're coming off a win, and I'm sure everybody feels like that. Hopefully we've got some more of you, no offense, fair weather fans that maybe took a couple weeks off. Maybe you're coming back this week. And we also want to just welcome any new listeners who might be joining us from the Spartans Illustrated Hub. We are beyond thrilled to be featured by Spartans Illustrated and really looking forward to just continuing to hook you guys up with excellent MSU sports content. Obviously, we hope that you're tuning into the podcast. If you're listening, you already are. But there is just so much excellent MSU athletics content on Spartans Illustrated. Really just, they're doing what we want to do as a podcast.
Totally. So if you're anything like me and you can't get enough of Michigan State content, or you're wanting to know if you have a new episode out, head on over to Spartans Illustrated where you can have all the content following football, basketball, and beyond each week.
All those other sports too. I know we've talked about this before, like basketball, football is kind of our bread and butter. We've started getting into hockey a little bit in the last year or so, but there is so many awesome Spartan athletics out there, and they have got all the news for you. So thanks, Spartans Illustrated. We're excited.
Check them out.
That's great. Absolutely. There is so many good things to cover in today's episode. Probably the biggest on everyone's mind is that it is
Hate Week.
I was going to say rivalry week, but I will take hate week.
It's hate week.
Okay, hate week. That's what we're going with. And just for those of you who, I guess we just dove right in with content when we started this podcast. It was like football season is starting. We got to give our listeners a rundown of what's going on. And I realized that maybe you don't really know who we are at all. One, we're just a random couple that loves Spartan sports. Like neither of us have any sort of journalism background. We just have a microphone and a lot of excitement for MSU sports. But I think it's helpful to learn a little bit about our backgrounds and kind of why we're so passionate about this. So this story seems especially relevant for rivalry week. Some of you may not know, Jonah was born into a family, I love you, Wilson family, that is Michigan fans.
It's true.
I'm going to just let that sink in for a second. Jonah, being the wonderful young man that he is, and the Lord knowing that that's the calling that he needed on his life, as a young kid growing up in West Lansing was like, hey, I'm going to be true to my hometown. I am going to be an MSU Spartan. Can you just talk a little bit about what that was like having two older brothers who are die-hard Wolverine fans?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that, I can't even remember a specific moment about when I made that.
You were little.
Official switch. Yeah, I was pretty little.
There's pictures of you 6, 7 in MSU gear.
Which I'm surprised my family even bought for me. So maybe they do love me.
Shout out to the Wilson family. We really do love you. But I always joke with people. We've been together for closing in on a decade soon. And I always joke with people that God knew that Jonah needed to be an MSU fan or our relationship wouldn't have worked out. And people always kind of oh, ha, ha. And then I had somebody the other day say to me you got to stop saying that, Abby. You're so much of a bigger person than that. And I looked them in the eye and I said, no, I'm really not. You know me. I am the most competitive person in the world. We sometimes have to leave rooms to not get into it too much when we're rooting for the same team. This would be a very rough week. One, this podcast would not exist, but this would be a very rough week if you hadn't made such a phenomenal, enlightened decision as such a young child. So way to go, Jonah.
Yeah,
Very proud of you.
Glad I made that choice, and I'm sticking with it.
No matter what happens this week, we are diehard, lifelong MSU fans for sure. Okay, but before we get too far into the U of M matchup, we have a huge win to celebrate, to break down, to highlight, because I think there's some really important things that happened on Saturday that I hope will be foreshadowing of what's to come this week. So take us through the Iowa game. What do you want to start with?
I think to start off, I mean, we saw everything from Michigan State on Saturday that we were hoping to see from the Spartans as we hope for a win going into the game. We talked about Michigan State needing to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball to open up things for Aiden Childs and the rest of this offense. And really, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say this was the best the offensive line has looked all season long.
And we talked about that last week. I mean, I think we very clearly said the O-line is going to make or break this game.
Mm-hmm.
And even the friends we were with, right as the game started, I was like, the O-line has to pull through in order for us to make this happen. And they did.
Yeah, and seeing those holes open up for both KLA and Nate Carter.
Yes.
As a team, rushing for around 250 yards, over 5.5 yards per carry, which is just awesome.
Yes.
And good. Opened up a lot of this offense in order to move the ball consistently throughout the whole entire night.
And I feel like Childs had a decent amount of time to throw. There were a couple instances, but that's going to happen in any football game. So I feel like they really brought it on both the run and the pass coverage this week.
Yeah, and that was coming out of the bye week. Just being able to see that improvement with the injuries that we've seen.
Right, that's what I was just going to say.
With the underclassmen having to take snaps. I mean, shout out to Coach Mikulczyk. That was a great performance to really get those guys ready to play against a pretty talented defensive front in Iowa and really set the tone.
Pretty talented. They're like one of the best defenses.
Yeah, but they set the tone from the first drive of the game, first run of the game in order to get Michigan State on the board early.
Absolutely. One other thing that you and I, we were walking around campus. We were headed over to Sparty statue to watch the guys walk into the game. And we were talking about the upcoming game against Michigan of what number of turnovers do you think that we can have and still have a shot at winning that game? We'll talk about that more, but just the fact that we only had one turnover this game is huge. I mean, I think we've been wishing for that all season. So shout out to Aiden Childs, way to work on those grippy hands. And then Aiden Childs was just insane in general this week. His stat line was crazy. He completed 22 out of 30 passes. He had 251 passing yards and then 51 rushing yards. Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah, awesome. I know. It was awesome to see. And I think moving forward with the schedule that Michigan State has remaining, if they can stay even on the turnover margin or positive, they're going to be in every single one of these games down the stretch. So it was awesome to see them limit the turnovers Saturday against Iowa because it was able to keep the offense on the field. And when the offense is on the field, you're able to get points.
Definitely. And I think this is a little aside, but we were just watching back the highlights from the Texas-Georgia game because that was going on at the same time as the MSU game, which that was just a weird, crazy game to watch highlights from. But they had so many turnovers. I think it's easy for us to hold on to the interceptions or the fumbles as this is only an MSU issue. But are you kidding me? The top, number 1 and number 5 team in the country each threw multiple interceptions and fumbles. It's not a problem that's just unique to us. And we're working on cleaning it up. So let's hope that continues this week.
Right. And I think it was just super promising to see coming out of the bye week, coming after a stretch with losing 3 straight games, to come out with that much focus, intensity, and improvement off of things that were essential to improve off of in order to put them in self, not just to win, but really control this game from start to finish. There was never really a ton of moments where it felt this game's kind of dicey.
No.
Even when Iowa brought it within
huge run.
5 points, then it kind of always felt that Michigan State was in control because they were able to, when they had the ball on offense, run the ball, get short yardage plays for Aiden Childs and the receivers in order to make those drives.
Well, and I think it only felt as comfortable as it did because of Jonathan Kim. One, he had 18, if you count the extra points.
Yeah. 20 points.
20 points of our 32. So one, he set us up extremely well for that second half. But I think even being only up 5 points, it was like, we know Jonathan Kim's going to hit a field goal if that's all that our offense gives us. He's already been our player of the week twice this season. He is my player of the week again for the third time this season, setting a school record for field goals, hit a 55-yarder. I mean, this kid's insane.
It was unreal. And like, you can understate, obviously, the skill and clutch gene that it takes to be able to nail that many field goals without any issues.
Yeah.
But also the additional confidence that gives the offense. Like, we've seen this year how deflating it can be to have a successful drive that goes deep into the opponent's territory, not end in points.
Yeah.
But the fact that even though they weren't able to capitalize on touchdowns on all those drives, the fact that they were still able to get points
on the board,
helps that offense continue to have that momentum and success moving out throughout the game, when in the second half, they were able to capitalize on some of those drives and turn them into touchdowns.
Because that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think our one critique, and this has been a theme for a couple of weeks, a lot of times we're probably going to sound like a broken record because it's not like there's going to be completely new issues and resolved issues every week, but it's just capitalizing in the red zone. And again, we love you, Jonathan Kim. Please don't ever stop what you're doing. You're amazing. But we have to be able to finish in a little bit more of those scenarios. Weirdest halftime score ever.
Yeah, 12 to nothing.
Like, just so bizarre. And
I think that leads us to another next thing we need to highlight is how well Joe Rossi had this defense playing, especially in that first half. This Iowa team was coming into the game one of the best rushing attacks in the country.
I didn't realize that.
Their running back, I believe, was the number 2 leading rusher in all of college football.
That's crazy.
And
aside from that one huge run he had, weren't you saying like their rushing yards was pretty minimal?
I mean, if you take that rush away, 75 yards, they were averaging 2.3 yards per carry.
Crazy.
Which is just, this isn't a, I know we talked about last week how this isn't a great Iowa offense, but this is a pretty good Iowa rushing attack. And the fact that not only are they limiting the pass game, but they were really giving these Iowa backs no room to run in the first half, allowing Michigan State's offense to kind of get going and get some points on the board was just phenomenal.
Definitely. I don't think we say this all the time, but I don't think we can wrap up this conversation about the Iowa game without talking about freaking Nick Marsh. That kid.
Yeah, 8 receptions, I believe.
He's insane.
113 yards, Big Ten Freshman of the Week.
It was like 14.1 yards per reception. I mean, nutso.
Was Pro Football Focus's highest rated freshman of the week. Like, this kid's a stud.
Crushing it in all realms.
And he's a difference maker. He's a guy that can really single-handedly change the trajectory of a game with the plays that he's making. And I know he was banged up for a couple of weeks after that Maryland game, but to see him now back 100% with Montorie Foster also having 100 yards receiving, this offense, we're seeing how good this offense can be when they take care of the ball and when they're able to have success running the ball.
Definitely. Man, I think that recaps the Iowa game pretty good. Besides the fact we got to actually be at the game in person, homecoming environment is so fun. I know that the school has no say in like what time the game's actually held because of the TV networks and whatever. But a night game for homecoming, so fun. It was the most beautiful day in East Lansing. Just like all the beautiful red brick buildings, the trees are turning. I know I'm being cheesy, but it just like that is quintessential football season. It was 70 degrees. People were tailgating. It was a great time. Just such an awesome environment to win that game.
It's a beautiful thing to be a Spartan.
It is. Absolutely.
I know we want to kind of jump into the big topic of this week, and that is rivalry week or hate week.
So now you're changing it, Colin.
Okay, maybe feel maybe a little bad. But anyways, we wanted to incorporate this week, this upcoming matchup, into our We Got It Covered segment.
Yes.
Because I think it's important for you guys to understand, if you are a new Spartan fan, maybe haven't been following these team or this game for very long.
Or even you have. We were talking about some of these matchups between MSU and Michigan. And I think there's a lot of false propaganda put out there by a certain team from Ann Arbor about like the actual history between Michigan and Michigan State. So for those of you who don't know, each week, one of the things that I think makes our podcast a little bit more unique and what I hope helps everybody tune in is that we're really passionate about Spartan fans of all levels, if you're going to call it that. So people who, you know, maybe they are a brand new freshman at MSU, not super familiar to the state or the school, to somebody like my dad who's been following Spartan sports for 50 plus years, to really feel like you know what's going on in the games, that you feel like you can participate in conversations with other Spartan fans. And so our podcast, We Got It, is this attempt to kind of say like, hey, we all together got it. And then this segment is that next little step of like, hey, we've got you covered. So these weird penalties that you see during a game, or odd rules, or maybe play calling that you're just not very familiar with, we kind of take that next step further. Most of the time, it's Jonah teaching me things, because especially when it comes to football, there will be a flag thrown. And I'm like, why in the world is that flag out there? Or why did those penalties offset each other? And so we kind of take you through some maybe a little bit weird aspect of sports or sports history in this week's case.
Yeah.
And just help you feel like you've got it too. So we want to focus this week a little bit on the past history between the University of Michigan Wolverines, boo, and your MSU Spartans, or Spartan Dogs. What is the first little tidbit of information you want to give us?
I think it's important, and I think any Spartan fan probably gets this feeling, that Michigan fans, they like to be a little bit of ancient history buffs. They're big on archaeology and ancient, history that not even your grandpa was alive for. So when the Michigan fan in your office,
yes,
in your neighborhood, whatever circles you are in, comes at you this week and talks about, oh yeah, so-and-so, Michigan's done this, done that, they have this record against Michigan State. That's fine. That's good. Let them have it.
We're not saying that that's not true. It's true.
But I, for one, when thinking about this rivalry,
yes,
like to think a little bit more relevant terms.
A little more modern.
So, in the last 20 matchups between Michigan and Michigan State, so dating back to 2003,
okay,
what do you think the head-to-head win totals are for each team?
Like how many games out of the 20 Michigan has won and how many MSU has won?
Right.
That's hard. I feel like a bad person for saying this, but I'm going to say Michigan 13, MSU 7.
It's actually a dead split down the middle, 10-10. So over the last 20 years, Michigan State has won 10 and Michigan has won 10. So this rivalry has literally been for the last 20 years
totally
about
dead even.
as even as you can possibly get. So when the Michigan fan in your life who likes to bring up ancient history from
the 50s,
the 1930s, when Michigan was out here playing high schools and rowing clubs, let's bring up some relevant history, some recent history where these folks were actually alive for.
I feel like that's valid. Okay, again, we're not refuting that Michigan has all those wins, but I do think it helps to look at, we talked about so much in our football season preview, how much the landscape of college football has changed, even since D'Antonio. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about where football was back in the 90s, the 80s, it's totally different gameplay. And so I do think it helps. And whatever, there'll be Michigan haters that hate that we're talking about this and say that we should look at the full scope of football or whatever. And I whatever, but I think it's helpful to look at what's been happening recently.
Totally.
I have a fun little tidbit for you.
All right.
So obviously anyone who has seen a MSU Michigan game will see them running around with this weird hairy man with an axe statue after the game.
He has a name.
I know that. I'm trying to lead up to that.
Okay.
which is the Paul Bunyan trophy. And so I went down this weird rabbit hole of like, why Paul Bunyan? And I was really hoping to uncover some like really exciting tidbit about like Paul Bunyan. I don't know. I was hoping to find something cool. It's not that cool. Apparently, when Michigan State joined the Big Ten back in 1953, the current governor of Michigan gave the Paul Bunyan Governor of Michigan trophy, that's the full name, to Michigan State as like a welcome to the Big Ten. And then it has been passed back and forth between Michigan and MSU. The only reason I could find why it's Paul Bunyan is simply because Michigan is known for being a logging state.
Wait, so you said the governor gave it to Michigan State?
Yes.
So Paul Bunyan's rightful home is in East Lansing then?
I mean, that's what I was reading, was that it was given to Michigan State when they joined the Big Ten, and then somehow it started getting passed back and forth.
All right, boys. You know what the job.
Do.
Paul Bunyan, residence, is in East Lansing.
Back home.
And he's been kidnapped.
He has been kidnapped.
He needs to be back in East Lansing where he belongs, where he feels comfortable, where he feels safe.
Yes.
Around his people.
Absolutely. Also, random fun fact. The statue itself is like 4 feet tall, but then he sits on a base that's 5 feet tall. And so people think it's like one of the tallest rivalry trophies that exist.
It ain't no joke, that's for sure.
Okay.
It means something to me.
Let's get out of the weird old history. I just, again, Michigan fans can hate on us for continuing to bring this up, but there was a very important anniversary that occurred on October 15th. So a little bit earlier this week. Which is the Trouble with the Snap anniversary. Such a good moment.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not go into this week without seeing that video pop up everywhere you go on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook?
Jalen Watts Jackson just running through my mind. He really sacrificed himself. We owe him forever.
Yeah, I mean, this series has been full of iconic games, heartbreaking moments.
Yes.
And I'm ready for some new moments on Saturday. Like I said, we get Paul back where he belongs.
Absolutely.
How is that going to happen, you might ask? Well, lucky for you, I have the stat on how the Spartans, the recipe that they're going to cook up on Saturday.
Okay.
In order to bring good old Paul back to where he belongs.
You're saying you have like the secret sauce.
I got the secret sauce.
Okay. Are you going to share that with
I'm going to share the secret sauce.
Okay. All right.
So, since 1969, I know we talked a little bit anti-ancient history, but this is a trend since 1969. Okay, so it's been continuing on since then. The team, 46 out of the 52 games in that span.
Okay.
So over 90% of the time.
Sure. Your math's a little faulty, but sure.
Over a lot of the percentage of the time, the team with the most rushing yards wins this game.
Interesting. And
that's been a trend that's also been pretty relevant in recent history as well. Right. So thinking about our keys to the game against Iowa and controlling the line of scrimmage, historically speaking, the team that's able to control the line of scrimmage in this game has gotten Paul Bunyan.
When you say control the line of scrimmage, so here we're going to go into something a little more technical. In my mind, that seems like it's like a no-brainer. Duh. If you're controlling the line of scrimmage, then you're getting more sacks, you're opening up more things. When you're saying control the line of scrimmage, do you mean that, or do you mean just opening up the run game?
When it comes to this stat, I'm talking about
opening up the run game.
Opening up the run game, yeah.
I mean, obviously, if we can protect the quarterback so that he can successfully attempt like 100% of his passes.
Right.
That's great too. Okay, I was just curious.
And thankfully, Michigan State played a very similar opponent this past week against Iowa. They have a very similar makeup as to Michigan. They want to do very similar things as far as on defense. They want to be able to run the ball first on offense. And Michigan State showed that, hey, playing this kind of football, we can win, and we can actually do it better than you.
I hope so.
So when
they did it against Iowa.
When
so
you're
gotta take it that next step.
Watching on Saturday, and it's about halftime, and the game's still kind of up in the air, look at the rushing stats.
That's true.
It might give you a good indication on who has a better shot of winning the game. And if that flips at halftime, See if that stat ended up flipping in the second half.
That's so interesting.
So that's your homework for Saturday. Be watching out for the rushing stats. And now I know for a fact that the team with the less amount of rushing yards is going to win on Saturday because I'm saying all this. But that's your key to the game. That's your secret sauce.
But I think it's helpful to think about it. Again, we have been challenging our listeners lately to like do some homework. We've talked about different like shell defense. Try to watch before a play and see, are they in a cover 1 or are they in a cover 2 defense? So we like to leave you guys with some homework. And I think that's something fun to track. Maybe if you're someone like me who gets a little too emotionally invested in games, maybe that can be your little grounding thing of like, hey, I'm going to check the rushing yards when I start getting a little too ticked off or a little too stressed out or all of my fingernails are gone. That's your homework.
Yeah. And I think too, it's not just as simple as whoever has the most rushing yards, but we've talked about, especially last week, if you're able to have success on the ground, you're able to open up things with the rest of the offense, you're able to have more time
so much more
of possession. It takes more time off the clock running it versus passing it. If you have the ball more than another team, they can't score as much. So it really affects pretty much
so many
aspects of the game. Michigan State is going to need to have success on the ground and going to need to defend the running game against Michigan in order to win this game.
Absolutely. So hype your boys, Nate Carter and K-Ron Lynch-Adams up this week. Get them pumped for this game against Michigan.
I think it's time to really dive into this matchup a little bit.
Before we dive into Michigan week,
okay,
I just have to say a little blurb because you guys know I love basketball. Quick little update. There is not a whole lot going on in the basketball world. As far as last week, I felt like we had so much basketball content to cover. I think the guys had too much fun. They needed a little bit of a break. So really the only thing to watch out for this week is that Michigan State men's basketball has an exhibition game against Ferris on October 29th. So that should be the next thing on your basketball calendar. Otherwise, let's talk about this Michigan matchup some more. I feel like we already have, but let's get into the nitty gritty.
Let's get into the important stuff first. All right.
We're at the big house.
Vibe check. Ugh. How are vibes doing?
Sorry, that's not my vibe. I was saying big house.
It's not that big of a deal.
I know. It's just. Ugh. Okay. Anyway, vibe check.
Vibe check.
No, not even after Iowa. Before Iowa, I was very optimistic and feeling like, yeah, I think we can beat Michigan. After Iowa, my confidence has very much increased. I think we're going to win this game, quite honestly.
All right.
It's going to be a tough environment. I hate the big house, but it's just they have so many people, and it's Michigan. So it's going to be a tough environment, but I think we got it.
Yeah, I think we said already that Michigan, honestly, is going to be a very similar opponent on paper than what we just saw against Iowa.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Similar in the sense that they have strong rush offense and not a strong pass offense, that they've got a stronger defense. Is that what you're meaning by this?
I think, yeah, it's multifaceted. I think to start off with, basically the foundation of both of these teams is on their defense.
Okay.
So kind of when you think about, especially the last 5, 6, when you think about these teams historically thinking, you think of big, physical, hard-nosed defenses that are going to make life hard for you.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to come easy. Or to wear you down, take you late in the game, and finish you. That's what they want to do. On the flip side, on offense, it's very similar DNA or culture.
Mm-hmm.
They want to ram the ball down your throat. They want to punish you. They want to really be physical. They want to control the time of possession, all those things. Not that they're not ever going to pass the ball, but they're first and foremost are going to try to have success running the ball, wear down these defenses, and control possession of the football.
I think you're forgetting an important part of their DNA from the last few years, which is also sign stealing.
We'll avoid that topic for today because obviously I don't think it has relevance for
No,
Saturday.
I know.
But
I'm just still going to always be salty about it. I think we deserve that as Michigan State fans.
yeah.
Anyway, sorry, getting back on track.
Anyway.
Okay, do you feel like Michigan... Okay, so that's been their trend for the last few years, but obviously there were some huge changes. The University of Michigan football team, coaching staff over the last year. Do you feel like they continue to have the personnel to run that sort of a team, or do you feel like that's just kind of like their mentality?
I think I would say yes and no. I think what separated Michigan over the last couple years is they didn't just have a good defense and a good running game.
Right.
They had good quarterback play. They had good receivers. They were across the board. They had talent, and they were really well coached. I think this year they have to rely on that defense and that run game,
their core,
because Michigan literally does not have a quarterback.
Yeah.
They are through their third quarterback already on the year. Sharon Moore, Michigan's head coach, said today in his press conference that he's not going to say who's starting yet because I don't think he really knows who he's going to have starting on Saturday.
You don't think that's a ploy to try to keep like MSU on their toes or not being able to know what's happening? Or you think it's?
I really don't think it matters.
Maybe both. Yeah.
I really don't think it matters who Michigan brings out.
Yeah.
This game is going to be won and lost by the run game. I know we said that in the stat.
You're really just putting all your eggs in that.
I'm putting all my eggs in this basket.
I don't disagree with you. And I hear what you're saying about run game opening things up. And maybe you mean it too from Michigan's perspective of like they have, if they run a lot better than we do, they're going to win. But with people like Nick Marsh, Aiden Childs, Foster Jr., Glover, Isaiah Johnson, it's hard for me to not feel like we maybe could do like okay in the rush game, enough to establish that our pass game has something to do. But I feel like a lot of times our receivers have been burning other teams' secondary.
Right. I mean,
so I'm just pushing back a little bit. I think that again, if we can control the amount of picks that we're throwing, I think that our receivers and our quarterback have a lot going for us in the pass game this weekend too. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say I disagree with you. I would say maybe what I should say is Michigan's offense this year has not shown the ability to beat teams throwing the ball.
Yeah.
They have, in certain situations, shown the ability to beat teams by merely running the ball.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So, yes, from our perspective, we need to run the ball, but especially from Michigan's perspective, if they are able to run the ball and do it well, you're saying they're going to have a lot better shot of winning their game.
But if Michigan State is able to really limit Michigan's run game, similar to the way they did against Iowa, Michigan's and Iowa's passing game is nothing to write home about.
Yeah.
Michigan's is worse.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to beat you through the air. They're going to beat you by wearing you down, by running the ball over and over again.
And just having possession of the ball for longer periods of time.
Right.
Which I think is what we've seen, Ohio State, Oregon. One, we haven't been able to capitalize when we have had the ball on offense, but we've had such limited offense because they're not on the field that much. The other teams have been able to keep their offense on the field far longer than we have been able to.
Right. And I think looking at this matchup, Michigan's weaknesses kind of play into Michigan State's strengths. And kind of on the same side, like the areas that Michigan does do well, I don't think are areas they can easily exploit in Michigan State. Like I said, like Michigan State's run defense has been pretty great throughout the whole entire year outside of that Oregon game.
Yeah, that's very fair.
So it's kind of strength on strength.
Yeah.
Whereas on the flip side of the field, thinking about Michigan has struggled defending the pass so far this year at times. And Michigan State has the weapons to really make them pay for that. And granted, I think this is going to be probably a low-scoring game. It's going to be a nail-biter, probably to the finish. But Michigan State has the pieces in order to get this win, and I don't know if they'll do it. I want to lean yes, and I'll give a prediction at the end of the episode.
Which we're getting close to.
Yeah, but the pieces are there for Michigan State.
I'm not going to disclaimer my prediction, but I'm going to disclaimer my score prediction. I don't think there's ever going to be a matchup against Michigan where I'm not going to back MSU and say that they're going to win. I'm sorry. It's never going to happen. I'm too competitive. I'm too stubborn. I don't care if Michigan is ranked like number 2 and we're not even in the top 25 rankings. I'd be like, yeah, we're going to beat Michigan. So listen to Jonah. He's probably a little bit more realistic. So going into what you were saying of you don't think it's going to be a very high-scoring game, that's kind of reflected in the money line for this week too, right?
Yeah, I mean, the over-under for the game is 40 and a half.
Okay.
With the spread of being Michigan favored about 5.5. So that's kind of like a 22-17-ish.
Which is really similar to what the Iowa game was, right?
Yeah, as far as going into the game.
Flipped that on its head. So let's do it again.
But again, people didn't really expect Michigan State to put up many points against Iowa, and they put up 32, which very easily could have been more if they were able to capitalize on some of those touchdowns. One of
those 6 field goals.
So I don't know. I think that line should be a little closer, if I'm being honest. I think Michigan's getting a couple points because it's at the Big House.
Yeah, which, fair. But also, who cares about betting? Like, whatever's going to happen is what's going to happen. I think it's fun to talk about. And obviously, if there's people who bet out there, like, it's interesting to see what it's going to be. But ultimately, the game's going to get played. And just like Iowa, it could be totally wrong. And MSU could flip the script or anything like that. So do you want to talk about anything else before we get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I would try to tell you who Michigan's quarterback is for Saturday, but I don't even know if they know who that is.
Over that.
But yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about kind of the keys to the game. Mm-hmm. I think if Michigan State can be even or ahead in the turnover margin, they're going to win this game.
Oh, yeah, we were going to talk about that. So we were saying, as we were walking around East Lansing before the Iowa game, of what number of turnovers do you think that we can have and still be successful against Michigan? Right. And I don't think that we can have more than 2 turnovers not on downs. Like, no more than 2 fumbles or interceptions. And like you said, it's going to be like a versus what's the ratio of our turnovers to Michigan's, but if we can continue to limit the way we did against Iowa, I think we've got a shot. I think as soon as we start giving the ball up, just from a morale standpoint, I have been very impressed with Aiden Childs. Like, that kid has got some serious resilience and ability to like shut out past mistakes and keep moving forward. But I do think in that kind of an environment, Michigan fans are going to make you pay for any kind of turnover from just a pure demoralization standpoint. So I think if we can keep it 2 or under, we've got a shot.
Yeah. I think if you're asking me for my prediction, I'm going to go. This isn't predetermined. This is calculated in my brain in real time.
Okay. Just tell us your score prediction, you goober.
I'm going to say 27-21 Michigan State.
Okay. I feel like we're going to put up quite a few points.
Okay.
32 was a weird score because we had 6 field goals. What's a normal score? 31?
31? Pretty normal.
I'm going to say 31-21.
31-21. Okay.
I know I'm crazy, but I'm feeling it.
So you just added 2 extra safeties to my score pretty much.
Sure.
I like it. All right. We believe.
We do believe. We got this.
It's rivalry week. We love it. We can't wait for Saturday night to get here.
Absolutely.
If you're like us and need more content to consume this week, make sure to head over to Spartan Illustrated to get all you could possibly want when it comes to this game, this matchup, this team.
Absolutely. As always, we love hearing from you Spartan fans. So whether that's leaving us a few stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or sending us an email at our email, thewegotitpodcast@gmail.com, reaching out to us on X, Twitter, whatever it's called now, Instagram, all of the above. You know where to find us. We love hearing from you guys. We have had several We Got It Covered segments that have been inspired by questions that people have submitted or ideas for what we could cover. And so we really appreciate that feedback so much. Shout out to some of it. It's definitely my sister. She's one of our most loyal listeners. You know who you are. And yeah, thank you for tuning in. We know that there's so much great MSU content out there, and we want you to know all of it. But we hope that you feel like this is kind of your home for just kind of staying up to date with what's going on, maybe having a little bit of silly banter, putting up with Jonah and I as we push back on each other's opinions and just have fun together. So, all right, it's that time. Go green.
Go white.
Go
state.